Hi there. Hi, greetings all. How is everyone today?
Good evening, everybody.
Good
That's much.
evening.
Ah, wonderful. Thank you. Everyone's had a good day. Hopefully, we're going to get started in a few moments with our presentation on the core itself. It's going to give a few moments for a few more people to join us. Evening, Dawn.
Greetings. Yeah, so how is everyone feeling? The weather is getting better gradually, the sun is shining. This is a time where if you've got any injuries or ailments, you should start to feel a little bit better within yourself.
As Christoph will be coming back in a moment, hopefully it will just go into a nice detail about the core muscles, set me up nicely, so I don't have to talk too much about that stuff, because I'm always talking about them things there, and I can just describe more the alchemy of the core itself, what's going on in that space there. Present some ideas, something that, connecting some dots together. It's always about connecting the dots. But there are just so many layers getting involved in the understanding. That's why it's really good to have an in-depth. So in your mind's eye, when you start looking at stuff, you see layers in your mind. You can actually see the body in a 3D dimension. So when you're making up your light body, you actually see and recreate a true version of yourself. So that's why it's really important to see these layers, to understand them. Whether you know names, that's a whole different thing. I myself, it's like an ocean of endless light, the way everything connects together.
From the start. Yeah, so the core muscles. So what is the core? So what is the first thing you think about when we talk about the word core, or when you hear the word core? What is the first thing that comes to mind? So if you can either say it out loud, or if you type it out on the Zoom chat, just think about what is the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word core. So abs, someone said, and someone's put 6. I'm guessing that's a 6-pack, the belly, the abdomen. Perfect. Okay, that's an interesting answer. Central pillar, really good. And yeah, as we go through the presentation, we're going to see actually how much of that central pillar and that definition is really a good analogy for the core muscles. Any other answers? Going once, going twice? All right. So the core. So when I think about the word core, so we've got the stomach, obliques, and back. When I think about the word core, it always makes me think about the center of something. Yeah. And that might be either the center of us, that could be the center of the earth. We always think of the earth and earth's core. And then also the core of a cell, a lot of us will think of the nucleus or the brain. And even when we think of the brain of the cell being a nucleus, we might think of the brain in the body being the mind, the brain here. But what science is starting to show us actually is that there's a lot of intelligence, and there's a whole brain system which is going on in this region here, which is our core. And also when we look at that, and we look at around the solar plexus area or our enteric system, there's a lot of intelligence that seems to be situated in this region. So when we're looking at the core of anything, to me, it brings about the feeling of that real central point, yeah? And as Sahu was talking about last time, guarding the one, yeah? that being, that sitting around that same area here. So when we're talking about the core, we spent a lot of time last time talking about the pelvic floor muscles, yeah, and that being that real that base of our core muscles. But then at the top, we got the diaphragm here. So when we're looking at the diaphragm, that's actually the top part of our core. So we got the diaphragm, and then we've also got the pelvic floor, also known as the pelvic diaphragm. But then when we're looking at the front and the sides, we're also looking at the transverse abdominal, these muscles here, which are very, very important as we go through the exercises next time. We're going to see how much of an importance that muscle is. And then again, from this side, we've got the multifidi muscle or the multifidus muscle, which is at the back. So all of these four muscles are making up that central core. And I like this picture because the core muscles, when they're working together, it's like there's a cylinder around that whole trunk area, really covering all sides from the top, the bottom, the front sides and the back. All of them are working together, creating a shape, and they have an important function, which we're going to discuss in a moment. So also, when we're thinking about the core, it's also just realizing that although we've got those four inner core muscles, there are other core muscles around that also adds another layer to the internal core muscles. But not only do they add another layer in terms of allowing stability, but they also provide function. So, for example, we've got the gluteus maximus here, you know, and that's where our whole trunk and our whole core area sits upon, you know, the gluteus maximus. But then we also got our gluteus medius muscle on the side, which helps us to keep balanced and upright. And when we're doing things like running, you know, or climbing stairs or doing any type of strength activity, we can see how these other muscles are kicking in to create that overall stability of our trunk. Yeah. So when we think of the core, it's not just these four muscles, but there are other muscles around the area. As you can see, even the rectus abdominis, which, you know, is right at the front of our core, and also, you know, our obliques, our internal oblique muscles on the side, and our external oblique muscles. All of these things are contributing to our core. So this is just another representation of internal obliques, external obliques, the transverse abdominals, all this area also making up our core, not just the multifidi muscles, not just the transverse abdominals, and not just the diaphragm and our pelvic floor muscle, but also our gluteus medius muscle, minimus muscle, all these other muscles, iliopsoas muscles, they still also make up our core. Yeah. So it gets, you know, the more we look at the core and the more we examine what the rest of the body is doing, there is more to it than just oversimplifying the body. Yeah. So what is the function of the core muscle? The main function of the core muscle is to stabilize the spine. By stabilizing the spine, you're helping to prevent future problems in the spine. An unstable spine is a spine that's going to cause a lot of problems. And I'm not going to go through all the conditions caused by an unstable spine because that's like nearly everything. Even shoulder problems will be caused by an unstable spine because the spine and that region and having good stability of the spine and having a good core, that contributes to everything we do. And I'm going to show you some videos which is going to, you know, paint that picture a little bit clearer. So not only is it to stabilize the spine, which will entail and prevent any injury happening, it also helps to promote movement. So I work in neurodisabilities. I work with young people as well. And I've worked with people who's had a stroke or Parkinson's, etc. And when we're looking at stroke patients, stroke being the most one of the most researched neurological conditions out there, when we're looking at stroke, we see that throughout the whole rehab process, from, let's say, a person not being able to even get out of bed, a lot of our importance is on stabilizing the spine, stabilizing the trunk, creating that stability, creating that good sitting balance before you can even think of getting them standing, getting them walking. So a stable spine is a prerequisite, even on a neurological level, for us to even do any other movement. Because if I'm sitting here and my spine is not stable, it's really going to be very difficult for me to do, nice movement or a good sitting posture, or even do exercises and stuff like that in a functional way. And by doing things out of alignment, also, that can also increase our risk of injury. So, looks like I'm going back. Oh, no, going forward. So, when we're looking at stability in itself, let's see. Oh, yeah. So, when we're looking at stability, we have active stability component, we have the passive stability, and then we also have that neurological component, which also helps to stabilize. So these are the three components when we're looking at the overall stability of this whole spine and trunk area. So active stability is basically how these muscles are working to create the stability of the spine. Not just these muscles, but also the other extra muscles that I showed you in the earlier slides. All of these muscles are working together and contracting at different rates to create that overall stability. When we're looking at passive stability now, passive stability is to do with the ligaments of the vertebra, is to do with, the intervertebral discs, is to do with some of even the tendons and stuff like that. All of these things are creating the stability throughout its range. So for example, I'm glad the noise has stopped. When we're looking at the spine, if we was just to forget about the muscles, if we was to take away the muscles, etc., you will get some type of stability. Yes, it will collapse, but there will be some type of stability still connecting it together through all the ligaments and through the disc and through the capsules and through even the fascial component. So this is the passive part of that spinal stability, even without the muscular stability. So the active is the muscles, the passive is all the ligaments, the vertebra, etc. And then we got the neural component. And the neural component it's like a feedback mechanism. So it's taking information from all our passive, the passive structure. It's taking information from our muscular structure, which is, and it's also providing feedback. So even in a muscular way, feeling our posture, feeling that we're going off center, that's just one example. We can recruit muscles now to adopt a good posture, but we need that neural component to provide us the necessary feedback and the necessary data to help inform us on what to do, yeah? So the neural component is communicating in a two-way process to the active component of stability, which is the muscles, and also the passive component of stability, which is to do with the ligaments, etc. All right. So just to bring to your attention, so again, when we're looking at optimal spinal stability, we are looking at where our center of gravity is. And basically, when you think of our center of gravity, it's a point in the body where gravity will try and balance itself. So in a perfectly straight person, the center of gravity is going to be sitting somewhere around the navel, the trunk region, as you can see, just above around where that pelvis is, just in that same place what Sahu's talking about in reference to Garden 1. So the center of gravity is going to be there. The center of gravity is not a static thing because as we change our posture, so does our center of gravity also shift. So for example, if you're standing on one leg, the center of gravity will shift slightly over to that side you're standing on. And in terms of optimal alignment, we want the line of gravity, that optimal line just to go past all these points, which is known as the plumb line. The plumb line is kind of how we as clinicians, or even people in the biomechanical fields, we're looking at the plumb line and we're making sure that all these points are as close to the plumb line as it can get. If someone has any structural abnormalities, or let's say they had extra rounding of the back, you will see how certain key points within the body, like such as the shoulder joint, will be shifted away from that plumb line. Yeah. So this is a good way how we can measure someone that comes into the clinic and see how aligned they are. And any discrepancies away from that plumb line is going to affect the center of gravity, and it is more than likely going to be evident in certain muscles being tighter than others. Yeah. So that's basically what the plumb line is in reference to our center of gravity. And then if we tie it back to that whole trunk stability, we are looking at how these core muscles are keeping that spine aligned. Because if these core muscles are not working, then you're going to get much more deviations or much more curvatures. That's going to shift our center of gravity. That's going to cause tightness in some areas and weakness in other areas, and also can lead to the whole degenerative process of the spine, etc. So this is just an example of how our center of gravity does shift depending on activity. So as we can see, this is someone standing, and it will very much resemble, where the center of gravity is in this perfect image of posture. When we're walking, when we're running, the center of gravity is going to shift a little bit more forward because this is the direction we wish to head. When we're looking at imagine this is actually meant to depict someone walking with a walker, like a four-wheeled walker. And as you can see, the center of gravity, it is shifting much more forward. And this is where people will get a lot more pressure on their back or their scapula, etc. So again, tying it back to that stabilization and what our core muscles are meant to do, it's meant to keep everything in that nice optimal posture. So hopefully we do end up like this in our older age. Hopefully we can keep our center of gravity much within our center of mass, and just that whole optimal posture and symmetry. So again, when we're looking at center of gravity, it's also just important just to be a little bit aware of our base of support. And when we're looking at our base of support is just the part that our body makes contact with. So as you can see, 2 feet on the ground, the base of support is quite large. If there was only 1 foot on the ground, the base of support will be smaller. The center of gravity will be shifted a little bit more onto the same side of the standing leg. And again, this is not so much, or unless, we're talking about sports and performance, we don't think about this in everyday life. However, as we get older and we develop, let's say maybe weakness on one side compared to the other side, then this is where we're going to get our center of gravity being more displaced. from that optimal plumb line. In sport, it's very good to be aware of this because again, our trunk and the trunk stability will recruit the correct muscles in the correct intensity to keep the balance of the center of gravity over the base of support. Because if the center of gravity is outside of the base of support, the more you need the trunk support to keep balance. If that center of gravity was all the way here, then the person's either has the ability to fly or the person will either have, Michael Jackson like balance. I'm just reading the comment. Is anyone else having problems? I can see you may need to log.
Yeah, don't worry about that,
Oh,
Chris.
okay. Oh, sorry.
Don't
Okay,
worry about that.
that's fine. I thought that was reference to me.
You're all right.
So yeah, so the further the center of gravity is away from our body and that plumb line, the more balance and the more we need to be able to recruit the right muscles to keep balance. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, then I can surely repeat that again. So, all right. So why is spinal stability important? So spinal stability is important because at different positions, there, there is different pressures that is affecting the spine. Yeah. So we're more talking about the intervertebral disc, but research shows that in terms of pressure, standing alone is, there's up to about 100 kilograms of pressure on the spinal discs. And I did have a look at the research and, when we're talking about pressure, the way you measure pressure, there's another calculation involved in that. So, when we're looking at pressure, we can see that over a surface area, there's a lot of force being generated. And if I just come out just quickly, just to give an example of what the pressure looks like with a model I've got, this is the disc, yeah? And this is a disc, and the disc is basically a shock absorber between the two vertebrae. And the reason why we want something and we need something soft like this between the spine is because that then allows movement. If we just had spine throughout and bone, we will just have no movement. We will have no flexibility. In conditions like ankylosing spondylosis, we see that it's an inflammatory condition which causes a fusion of the bones. And that fusion can make a person very rigid, very stiff, in a lot of pain, etc. This is not what we need, so the creator designed us in a way where we have flexibility, and to achieve flexibility, we need something soft in between the spine. Also, when we're jumping, we need something to cushion, yeah? So, in demonstration of how well the body does to cushion everything, when things fail, this is when we start to get problems. We get the outer surface of the disc becoming torn, and as bits become torn, the inside, which is like a gel-like substance, can start to bulge, then can start to herniate a little bit, and then this can press on the nerves, and then this causes problems like sciatica, etc. A lot of the time we look at sciatica and condition and we think, oh, I've got sciatica. And there's different forms of sciatica in terms of intensity, etc., and cause. You can get a young person in the gym who's done a bad technique and they've herniated their disc. They can get sciatica. Their symptoms can clear up within 4 to 6 weeks' time, or a little bit longer than that. On the other hand, we get an elderly person, and this is more of a gradual process. And then this is, especially depending on age, this is a process where they basically degenerating over a period of time. And having to really live with the pain rather than it reversing so well compared to an older person. And that doesn't mean that just because the person's older, they shouldn't be able to get some level of good recovery, in some circumstances, full recovery, depending on the problem. But it's just to demonstrate that one can happen kind of instantaneously. And where everyone falls into the category is it as time, even beyond the age of 30. If everyone had the MRI above the age of 30, you might see some type of protrusion happening or bulging disc, as it is known clinically. Yeah. So, and basically, this is the pressure, and this is the effect of pressure on the actual disc. Yeah. So then, if we go back to the presentation, then we can see basically as we're lying down, there's less pressure, lying on the side a little bit more, standing about 100 kilograms. As we're standing, bending forward, even more pressure. Going back to sitting down, less pressure, but that is someone sitting backwards. This is someone sitting upright, and this is someone sitting forward, which is like the worst position we can do. So when we're looking at practically on an everyday level, no one's really doing this, holding a a heavy rucksack for any period of time. We might be doing this to put our rucksack down with our laptops in, but no one's just standing like this. However, what do we see most of the time? We see everyone almost, not necessarily like that, leaning forward with a weight, unless you're moving your bag again, but we see everyone leaning forward, and then even worse, which is not even placed on this diagram, but leaning forward and then typing. And then again, even worse, depending on how high your keyboard is. A lot of that is causing a lot of bad pressure on the spine. Yeah, so this is why spinal stability is important, because by having the stability, we're able to withstand and endure some of these postures over a longer period of time with less of a negative effect. It's never, ever, ever going to be good to sit down in a poor posture. Anyway, this is why you need to get up, either maybe lie down, relieve some of the pressure in the spine, which is building up through a 7-8 hour day. Yeah. So going forward, this is just, again, another example of just the pressure that's being placed on the intervertebral discs. And this, again, is just some of the movements and exactly where some of that pressure is caused. So, for example, in a person bending forward like this, what you're going to do, you're going to get compression at the front, and then you're going to get risk of, so this is the nucleus pulposus, is basically the gel-like substance within the thicker annulus which surrounds the disc, and that propulsion of the nucleus pulposus is actually going to squeeze and push against the wall. Over time, we're talking about years, etc., that can create little kinks in the wall. And then over time, this is where we start to see the bulging, and not just the bulging, then eventually the herniation, etc., and major problems. Yeah. So, when we're looking at sports, where we might be forced to do this activity in volleyball, stand up, jump, lean backwards, and then hit the ball. Or when we're doing reaching activities in maybe tennis or just a stretch, or in American football, where a person might catch it with one hand and be on the floor. Overall, we can see there's a lot of pressure on the intervertebral disc. And one thing that is important to note, which I don't think I mentioned, was it in that slide? Yeah, can't seem to find it, but no, that's fine. Yeah, so no, basically, what I was going to say is when there's just basically a lot of pressure during activity. And I think, I remember now. So let's just say, let's take away the muscles, etc. If we got a spine, let me just show a picture of the spine. If we just got the spine, let's forget about the muscles. That spine is going to crumple even under 10 kilograms of pressure. Yeah, it will just crumple. This is why the active component of the muscles are so important. Yeah. And 10 kilograms is not a lot of weight in the grand scheme of things because, just by lifting up 2 heavy bags of shopping, that's easily 10 kilograms and in some cases more. So just think of putting that on your head, a bag of shopping, and just knowing that without your muscles, that spine will just start to collapse on itself. Again, this is why the core stability is so important. All right. So when we're looking at spinal degeneration and, problems with our core muscles, a lot of the times you start seeing spinal degeneration in certain occupations like painters, decorators, bricklayers, they're putting a tremendous amount of weight on the spine. I think some of the newer generation of bricklayers and stuff, I mean, some of them are just really muscular. And you can tell that some of them are really in the gym to be strong for their work. I was watching a documentary and it was on this guy, and this guy was climbing up these high towers, and the amount of, the ladder he had to climb up each and every day, he just realized that he had to keep the muscles strong in order for him to do his job. So this is the approach that we need to take because this isn't just a natural process that will happen. I'm not saying it will get to this level or that level, but usually most of us will at least get to this level. Is a Tai Chi master's this like that? I doubt it. And even if it is, it's probably so insignificant that it's not causing any problems at all. And how do I know this? Just based on what they can do, the flexibility at their old age, the vigorousness on the health, because the spinal column, as to who and through the practice of Tai Chi, he will make you more aware of is, it is a big part of our energy centers and the flow of energy. So if you have any deterioration going on at this level, that energy that goes up through the main channels, even as the meridians, it's going to be disturbed. And through the disturbance, that's going to also cause problems and further degeneration. That's why being upright and having a good posture throughout our lives, more even important from the age of 40 or even 30 and beyond, because you can be doing practically nothing up until, your 30s or whatever. And based on your social interaction and maybe doing a little bit of sports here and there, you shouldn't have any major problems. However, as you get older and the longer you neglect certain activities, the more this process is just going to happen naturally. Yeah. And this here causes a lot of pain, medication, mobility problems. Even at this level, it will cause a lot of pain. At this level, this can sometimes be the person in the gym that's done a bad technique, getting a little bit of a herniation, that chemical reaction, the swelling and all that impacting on the nerve. This is what they will find on a lot of people if you had the MRI. If you go to your GP and ask for MRI, they're not just going to give you an MRI just to check this, because that's not really, it shouldn't cause major problems. But before it gets into a problem, it's just being aware, of how to keep the spine healthy. This is just a video because I know I spoke a lot about the stabilization component, but it's also really important to understand that once stability is there, movement is generated from the stability. And this is just giving an example of, we can think of our core as this small portion up to the diaphragm, which I mentioned, down to the pelvic floor. However, in reality, the core is the glutes as well. The core is even part of the shoulder girdle and that whole system, which is working in a very interconnected way. So I'll just quickly play this video just to make you appreciate.
It's an overworked word, but there's no other way to describe Nick Vujicic. He really is inspiring. Nick was born without arms or legs. And when he tells the story of his birth, the shock, the confusion suffered by his parents, he'll have you in tears. Growing up wasn't all that much fun either. So how did this poor little Aussie kid do so well? Become school captain, go to uni, get a double degree, forget.
Should jump in, mate.
Nick Vujicic was born with no legs and no arms.
I'm going out on a limb. What do you want?
But he's sure got plenty of guts.
This is scary right here, mate. This is where you gotta have guts. Or you're a bit crazy. 10. Nice, mate. Thank you very much. You're a generous judge.
This 25-year-old Australian is climbing over every obstacle life puts in front of him, and he's doing it with style.
You really can do anything, can't you? Well, there's no harm in believing so. Everybody's going through something.
So yeah, so can you see how the core muscles are working and how it generates movement? The foundation of our movement is just another quick one.
Being born without legs hadn't stopped me from doing the things that I want to do. Well, people just, they'd make fun of me because I didn't have legs. The best way to deal with haters is to use the hate to lift yourself up. What didn't work, and there's a lot of things that don't. Wrestling, by a lot of trial and error. I spent years figuring out what would work, what didn't work, and there's a lot of things that don't work. But the things that do work, drill them over and over and over again until they're completely flawless. Until somebody might know I'm doing it, but I'm going to do it anyways, whether they want me to. I am feeling great about a match. I train about twice a day, every single day, about 6 days a week. And
yeah. So again, that's just a real other example of the importance of our trunk, not just for stability, but when stability is there, the movement can be generated from that. And this is just a quick depiction of problems that can go on. So this is like diastasis, which is basically during the birthing process, how that area here, right in the center of us, and the abdominal muscles can begin to separate. And it does over time. It separates firstly because of the childbirthing process, the laxity of the ligaments, the muscles, etc., to enable to deliver the baby. But if the core muscles are weak, you get the separation, and then after birth, basically the process is to get that area stronger because that will affect everything else. And let's just say if a person is better nowadays, but in the past where the core muscles weren't so much appreciated or healthcare, wasn't as it is now, or maybe over the last 20 years, things like weakness here over time can lead to things like inguinal hernias. And just like when we was talking about the pelvic floor, things like straining, even going to the toilet can risk the prolapse of the pelvic floor. So here you can have a prolapse in the fascia and the abdominal layers here, and you can get the intestines bulging out. Now the problem with that is if that becomes obstructed or twisted, that is an emergency situation. That's not, oh, let me go to the GP. That's, let me go to hospital and get an operation on it, But yeah, there's many people with these problems. And, it doesn't start off, in an emergency situation, definitely not. But it might start off as a little bulge or something like that. And this is the time where you really need to get it checked out. You don't want to just leave it and let the problem get bigger. But the same for those of you that were there for the pelvic floor talk, the same problems and weaknesses that happens at that level where you get the prolapse is the same things that can happen here. And especially these things are more common in women who's given birth. And, as, we get older, it can become a little bit more common and prevalent. But these are just two examples of weakness or problems with the core muscles. Again, with things like sciatica, that the increased risk factor with weakness of the core, the whole degenerative process of the spine, again, weakness of the core, the whole problem with even our pelvic floor muscles being the core, again, leads to problems. What I didn't do, I went through everything, but I think you may have appreciated it through the first slide, seeing the components of the pelvic floor. It is also good to go through it 3D wise. But what I'm going to do, we can leave that to the end with the questions. We're going to hand over to Sahu, so we're in good timing for today. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing that. Any questions at all? Oh, am I still here?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's see. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Chris.
Can I just ask, brother?
Is that Sankofa?
Yes, I can. Hi.
Good evening.
I just wondered then, so when you showed the different postures and how much pressure is put on the spine, and it's like 100 when you're standing correctly, when you've got good posture, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so, are you saying then, if you strengthen those muscles, your body can healthily and sustainably manage to bear more weight, much more weight than the 100?
Yeah. And that will basically show. So, for example, just show a picture of myself. So, for example, if I'm standing up, my core has to be a certain level of strength. We're not going to appreciate it at this level because most of us are walking, etc. But for the neurological patients that I see, with a weak core, they end up, you get them sitting on the edge of the bed, and then they might do something like this, and you have to kind of catch them before they fall. Or they might find it difficult, even if they are able to maintain a good balance, then they might find it difficult just to even do that. Lift their legs, do certain exercises. All of that is requiring good core strength. Now, on the level that we're going to appreciate it in a functional way, if and this is one of my favorite exercises I like doing in the gym, if I'm sitting on a stable base, and imagine I've got 2 dumbbells, yeah, and I'm doing this movement, because of the base of support that I've got, lifting up, let's say 15 kilograms or something like that, is going to be relatively okay and easy, yeah? Now, if I was to sit on a wobble board or a gym ball, because of the instability of the surface and the way the ball will move, I have to recruit my core a lot more. I have to recruit a lot more just to even lift up the weight, but I also have to recruit it a lot more just so I don't get into bad postures and pull a muscle. Yeah. So by strengthening the core muscles, we're able to do a lot more. So let's just do a little test. If you're at home, have a stand up on one leg, lift your leg up, lift your leg out like that. Now, how much of you are able to maintain that balance? Yeah, so up and then like that. And then challenge yourself a little bit more. Lift your arms up, put it to the front. By doing these activities, you should be able to feel your core working, because this is the center of me. If my core is doing all sorts, let's say it's leaning to one side, you know, okay, because my core muscles, this is relatively easy, you know, it's going to be able to maintain that posture. But my core is working a lot harder. Yeah. So core stability is important for everything. So even when we're standing, if we're lifting more weight, we can train the core a little bit more. But as long as we're putting our core in a position where it's going to have to work a lot harder. So definitely, in answer to your question, the stronger we get the core, the more we'd be able to do. Yeah. Oh, well done, Jamie, for being able to do that. But yeah, definitely the stronger our core, the more we'd be able to do. Even let's say if we're carrying shopping bags and we've got heavy shopping bags, you know, sometimes our posture is so bad climbing up the stairs because of the weight, but we want our core to be more upright, and we want the ability to hold the heavy shopping bags and lift our feet up whilst comfortably contracting our core. And the stronger we get our core, the more we be able to do these things without thinking about it too much. Yeah. So the weaker our core, so when I get, let's say, clients who, let's say, had the spinal cord injury, or they're recovering from surgery on the back, at first, even just walking, they feel like they're having to really contract their core. But then over time, as they get stronger and their core becomes stronger, they don't have to focus on contracting it aggressively. Because it's already strong, they can allow themselves to relax a little bit, and then they can continue on with the activity.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're more than welcome. Yeah, any more questions? The floor is open for you, Sahu.
Yeah, I think, well, thank you, Christos. That was a brilliant presentation. Shame we didn't get the visual, but I want to go into some of that now anyway, and discuss it in a brief manner, give a little bit of clarity. Because, you know, I see that stuff as layers as well. When we're talking about the core. All right, so since there's no questions and everyone's ready, I'm just going to do a overview. All right. So the alchemical process and the core muscles. So let's go straight into this stuff here. Because as Christos was talking about movement, maintaining the pressure, having all sides kind of equal during our movement, and also the nurturing of this embryo within our center. These are the two elements I'll discuss. Probably won't go too deep into the nurturing of the embryo. There's something else I'd rather discuss, but I'll probably go into it next time. But we'll see how the presentation goes on with that part there. So just going through this briefly. So this core area, functionally, as Christos has described to us, it's there to help us to strengthen or prevent injury through having a strong core. We reduce our back pain. We have an ability to actually lift, mobilize, bend forward, bend backwards, do backflip, balance, stabilize, enhances our posture. Also protection and stimulation. And I'll go through that in the second part of the presentation. But I'm just going to go through briefly just this part here, just to connect the dots together. So what we're seeing here actually is the second layer of the core in its action. This abdominal area. So this is the area that we are generally aware of as the core. As Christoph described, the glutes, the rectus abdominis involvement. For us in Tai Chi, we have this awareness of our lower dantian. And when we make contact with our lower dantian, we usually describe to place your finger, your two fingers, either a 2 inches or a few inches beneath your belly button, or let's say the space of your two fingers and you go down. And we would call this your false dantian. So we may be making contact with that point of our mind, and our thoughts may be on that point there. But it's just how Christoph showed the shifting of our body forward and the shifting of our body even more forward. All of that stuff there is shifting body weight and therefore shifting our center of gravity. So when we're dealing with our false dantian, then we can say that we are out of our center of gravity. So when we're slightly forward. So always trying to be centrally aligned and centrally fixed in Tai Chi. This alignment from this plumb line that was described, we are constantly trying to do that, even in walking. That means walking stance changes a little. There is an upwardness, a lightness in your walking when you start to walk. The long strides start to diminish when you start walking from your center. Because I'm sure everyone noticed it. And even when you're walking through the world, take a look. If you're taking a long stride, just take a look in a car window or reflection in the shop window and see the position of your head, your neck, the alignment of your spine, and how everything is just slightly forward when you have wide stride. Then shorten the stride and observe how your neck alignment aligns. Your back, your pelvis, and your hip, everything is more aligned. And that's going into your true dantian. So we have our third layer, the most superficial layer. Then we have the second layer, which we've been talking about, the diaphragm, the midiphiduses, the multifidus, the pelvic floor, and the abdominal tissue that covers the front of the belly, just underneath the rectus abdominis. This tissue here, what we were just observing here, is really integrated and protecting the whole of this space. And there is a lot of activity constantly with this tissue here. This tissue, this muscle here, probably does far more work than we appreciate. So generally, I would say that we're operating on the second layer. This layer can cause problems if you fortify and strengthen this castle, this part, this layer. The compression happens to this layer, which causes a problem. And then it ultimately brings compression into this layer, the center. So within the second layer, where we have these four muscles making a ball around your core, stabilizing the space here, we are in Tai Chi trying to maintain a constant expansion in this space. So we practice what we call sinking the chi. So guarding the one is being putting your mind into the space where the true dantian is, the lower dantian. So when you're standing upright and you're centrally aligned and you're breathing into this lower belly area, you're thinking of that space there, which makes you almost feel like you're floating in space. Forward, backwards, left and right, legs are balanced even between all of them. You do feel this lightness within this region. What makes it even more feel like you're floating is when you start to expand your breath, which is sinking the chi, which we're going to discuss a little bit more in a few moments. But this is one of those really, really important concepts in Tai Chi. And this is more from the alchemy, from a practical point of view, when we're interacting with the world and when we're trying to use force with the least amount of pressure to the body, to the joints and to the muscles. So then we have the first layer. When it comes to the core, generally, I would say the core will be down here. And then when I'm working in somebody's core, as we're looking, the core being something within the center, something housed within the center of something. We come to this region here, and this is the space that we are guarding. This one, the alignment, the balance between the psoas, the iliopsoas on the left and the iliopsoas on the right, which is a part of this iliacus, attached around the pelvic area. So all this connecting up to the diaphragm is all the true center of this space here. Like the last unit left, connected to bone. This is, you start stripping away layers. I mean, this is all anatomically incorrect in the sense that the human body doesn't have them layers in which is carved when they dissect or go through cadavers and they start to separate tissues and muscles. A lot of cleaning going on. There's a lot more stuff going on around here, but just for clearness of mind. So we have the diaphragm operating on the deepest layer of our core. And as this diaphragm expands and contracts, we have a nerve that flows through this space here, a nerve we all should be very familiar with, which is the vagus nerve. This vagus nerve, one of the 12 cranial nerves, starts in the brain, underneath, comes down along cervical, all the way down through your spine. Well, not literally through your spine, because it innervates all your organs. Then it passes and separates to make what we call the sciatic nerve. And it goes down into the feet. So this nerve has a long journey. And we're only going to be looking at this nerve from the point of view when it enters into the core, the space, the abdominal area. And it enters into this space. It is creating a parasympathetic response. So all the organs that it innervates, has a reaction or connection to, it calms them down. So we, through manipulating our diaphragm, shifting the pressure within this core region, can reduce the stress, the anxiety, the pressure that's going on with each organ within the body there, within the central area. Also, it affects the lungs. So it comes out, it also affects other organs in that space. So this is how it's flowing through. When it hits the core, hitting the liver, the stomach, and then the small intestines. So when we're breathing and we're practicing this art here of sinking the chi. Now, the sinking the chi, as you breathe in, you expand the belly. And as you breathe out, you maintain an expansion. We're going to go through that a little bit more deeper in a moment. But as all that is happening, this expansion and compression, we are creating voltage in this space here. We have all this fascia, this connective tissue, this biotensegrity. We have these different layers that cover over from the diaphragm over the front of the abdominal, over the organs that are filled with fat, filled with different layers of connective tissue, which offer protection in that space there. But also, because they are the type of connective tissue it is, it also allows for more electricity to flow in that space there. So you have an apron that covers over the front, which is beneath the transverse abdominis space there. So when we're breathing and we're sinking, we're trying to maintain this expansion. And this expansion takes place, also affects the lower dantian. So in that space, we can see the moving of the lumbar spine itself. So during Tai Chi practice, the reason why we practice this sinking the Qi, the idea is when breathing into this abdominal space, that when you breathe out, that you allow for the space to maintain its expansion, which is quite a challenging thing to do. The more you practice this, it's like you feel layers of your tissue start to open up, but also ripple as you're controlling your breath. All of this now leads to an extreme form of stability, which can truly only be appreciated in practice. Sitting still and expanding and feeling that experience there, you don't really appreciate the power that is being created. When you apply that in grappling, wrestling, or some kind of activity, this expansion, things change a little. For us in Tai Chi, when we're pushing hands or doing grappling, rotations and twists, they happen a little bit less. They happen where if we're in contact with a person, it happens where your whole body turns around its center. It's a funny thing, but your central body doesn't twist like this. There's no true twisting. It doesn't really bend the same way neither. Because it's like this. It's like filling up, pumping up a balloon really hard, filling it, tying the knot, and then just twisting that ball. And as you do that, it starts to strain and it'll pop if you go too far. It is like having a basketball, because those balls are really solid in your center. Once you've expanded and you've trained over a period of time, and when you turn this ball, there is no collapsing. In the beginning, it'll be like one of those softballs. When you turn, you feel a space collapse. You feel that you don't feel too sturdy. You feel that is a vulnerable space a person can enter into when you're grappling, or when you're pushing hands, or when you're doing a training activity. Especially when you're sparring though. So the whole idea of sinking the Qi in a practical sense for us who practice Tai Chi is to maintain that constant expandedness within our center. And as a result, our movements look mystical because the movements shift. You always end up in your center. This is why when we're describing lower dantian is in that space there, and we were talking about center of gravity is in the same space. When your abdominal area is expanding and you're breathing into this space here, your body doesn't shift forward. Your body doesn't shift back or to the side. Like your body desires to stay in the center. But as soon as you let it all out, as soon as you breathe all that air out and you compress your lower belly and your belly goes all the way in, then you've lost that expansion there. Then it's easy to turn. I mean, we can try this right now. We can, everybody, just for a moment, just connect with your breath. Just breathe into your belly. Just feel your belly expand and feel your belly relax. All right, so for the moment, we're just allowing the belly to go all the way in and all the way out the lower part of your belly. So now, try to just expand the belly and to maintain the expansion. So as the belly is expanded, just try to turn the body to the left and feel how it feels. Come back to the center. Take a deep breath in. Turn to the right. Breathe out, come back to the center. And just relax your belly. Just allow your belly to expand and to go all the way in. Expand and go all the way in. So as you're turning, just breathe like this. Just allow your belly to go all the way in and expand and come back to the center and do the same thing to the other direction. And it's such a simple activity. I hope that demonstrated that there is a big difference between holding and expansion. Even if you were to try it in this way, just expand your belly. Just keep it expanded as much as you can and try to breathe normally. Push it out as much as you can, a pop belly, and then just turn and feel how there's a stretch. And then turn the other way and feel how there's some stretches that take place within the core area. And that's because truly, even when you get more supple, the ball still doesn't want to do this. The core still doesn't want to even turn that way. And this is why when we go into Tai Chi, especially when you go into the higher skills, why masters were so revered is because of this concept here, that they are trained this way so well that they can only operate in a certain range, which also almost sounds limited. But when you observe like indigenous cultures, yeah, moving through, and you see them, let's say, climbing a tree, or you see them moving through a forest, or you see them building a hut, and you're just watching them do that. Yeah, but if you observe their anatomy, I should have done a video like that. If you observe their anatomy, a lot of time you will see they got an expanded belly, like a pot belly. Excuse that. When they're climbing up the tree, there's no drawn in belly. They're not climbing up a tree, yeah, or holding onto something, and the lower part of their belly, where their belly button is sucked in. You don't see that. You see like the whole space expanded. And that's not even trained. That's just moving naturally. And it's fascinating when you observe those kind of documentaries where you watch the indigenous culture and they'll be doing their thing naturally. And you watch a civilized culture and everyone will be doing things in a different way. Like we're trying to remake the human body. So within that core space, we have what we call the 5 elements, these different organs that we work with. And they are really like energetic conduits, which is moving this internal energy, holding certain frequency and vibration in the space that we mix together through breathing, through the expansion. This expansion allows for sliding and for things that happen within the space. So the intestines ain't so congested. So the large intestines ain't congested and compressed. So this ain't compressing onto the spine. So the diaphragm is not compressing onto the liver, and the liver is not compressing onto the pancreas and the stomach. See, all these things require space. When we tone this third layer, then we compress the second and the first layer, and all the stuff that's between the first layer and the second layer. All that lovely stuff is here, is this between the first and the second layer, the space between. This is the core reactor. Probably one of them, they're all interesting organs. We just don't have time to go through all of the organs. But what I would like to definitely touch is the enteric system. That organ there. Because we already are aware that this organ here has a gut-mind connection, that through the nervous system of the enteric system, we have an ability to experience what we call butterflies or intuition, foresight, the ability to feel that something is right or feel that something is wrong. All this information takes place within the gut, the second brain. And it's true to the fact that it has brain cells in that space there, within the gut. So this space, with this expansion, when we talk about sinking chi, with this expansion that's happening there, these nerve fibers, these nerve endings, because that image there on the right is just a scan of the nerve fibers only. So you're now looking to see how it's quite challenging to find imagery of the actual brain cells that are found within the enteric system, even though it's well known. But on the left-hand side, we have here actual small intestines and the microvilli, which are on the outside or the inside of the tube itself. And they pass through and they enter into the bloodstream. And it just enters into the body through this means here. But all of this here is done for these true reasons here. For stimulating electricity. You know, the thing always come back to electricity somehow or some way. We're creating space, sinking the chi and creating space to create more electricity. All these organs between this first and the second layer, we're looking to give them more energy or more electricity. So in this space, due to the biotensegrity nature of the tissue and the structures, due to the crystalline formation of these structures on a microscopic level, we have some fundamental sciences that take place that we're all aware of. So we have thermal conductivity. The space almost all of a sudden acts as a transistor, a semi, and a superconductor, which is just allowing energy to pass through the capacitor, an electrical insulator, and also a diamagnet. So I have all these things here, because all these are really talking about impeding flow, allowing electricity to flow, holding on to electricity, preventing the heat from affecting the space, and also allowing for heat to be changed into energy. So all that's happening within the gut, this it's like truly like a core reactor, you know. I know they talk about a core reactor, it's like for nuclear science, like a thermonuclear word, fusion. But it come like fusion takes place in the gut itself. And it requires space. Under contraction and restriction, overdeveloped abdominal muscles will inhibit it, and a tight psoas compressing from behind will just, again, compress this. So one of the amazing things that of it being able to create a magnetic effect is that all these magnetic and electric fields allow for the sliding to take place. So this space here, through friction, is generating a greater electromagnetic field. So when we start to meditate into this space, we start doing energetic works, or let's say we're doing healing works, the greater this space can expand, or you can connect to this space here, the more of a greater magnetic field you can create. You know, that magnetic field is just like when you place your hands in front of each other and you're slowly just expanding and compressing. And as you're doing this, you're starting to feel a pressure build up between. This is quite similar to what's going on inside there with the peristalsis, the constant compressing, contracting of these different tissues inside there. But there's also something else that's going on within the gut. Because we have something called electrogenic bacteria. There was some research done, and we hope, maybe they're holding this one here back, that they do more research into other bacteria. Well, they looked into a bacteria that generally causes food poisoning. And they found that although it makes you sick and unwell, the bacteria itself inside the gut create electricity. They form lines and patterns. And let me just show you the video, because I want to talk through this video itself. So the video is just showing, looking under a microscope, and it's not this actual bacteria that they're showing us. But when bacteria start to form in the gut space, they start to make these lovely lines. And then these lines here, and these are food particles, what they're showing here. So after they've made their lines of bacteria connecting to each other, as they start to move, they start to latch on to food particles. This is what they're showing that they found in their research. And they found that the same way, they found that there are bacteria through earth, in the soil, in water, deep in the ocean bottom. They do very similar things. They make these lines. They connect together and they make electrical grids. Some of them are able to power. So now they're looking into utilizing these bacteria, like to give energy to mobile phone and these things there. But if we go back into our own body, these are the things that are happening that we're unaware of. So if we're looking at it from the point of view of healthy gut bacteria, because I'm sure that at some stage they're going to find that all bacteria are creating voltage, are creating electricity. I'm sure at some stage they're going to find this. They've only just done research just on a few bacteria connecting to the human body. They've done a lot of research into the bacteria through the world, as I say, in the ocean bottom or in the soil itself, showing how they make these formations and how now they're trying to use that technology. But within our human body, if we now acknowledge that within this spacer, within the gut, we have all these brain cells going on and communicating around or in between the spacer, we have these bacteria, these healthy bacteria moving in this space as well. And they're also creating voltage. Through practicing that expansion, and that's just in our daily life, those bacteria, those healthy ones there, are allowed to do their job properly, which is maintain a certain level of voltage within this abdominal gut space along this alimentary canal. So it's a fascinating thing of our body. So when we're practicing this art here now of sinking the chi, we are gently holding the perineum as we expand. So we're all four of these, let's say, of the ball itself is observed. And as we breathe in, we allow for a whole of our abdominal area to expand as we breathe in. And as we breathe out, we're just maintaining it in that position there. But what we will feel that the space starts to shrink inwards. So we're really, in our mind, thinking about still maintaining the expansion outwardly as it relaxes inward. And that is probably more important to do on the lower part, beneath the belly area, belly button. It's quite easy to maintain. And it does depend upon the level of our flexibility and tightness in the upper part, beneath our sternum, our xiphozoid in the space there, where our diaphragm is. It does depend upon tension in that area there, of how much you can expand. But this is the purpose of sinking the chi, is to maintain space within the abdominal cavity. So then electricity, electromagnetism, thermomagnetism, because you know we have we have our creating voltage through movement, which is piezoelectricity. So and you would think, yeah, because it's all to do, it's degrees. Through experience, you will appreciate it. But you would think you would fill up the balloon and then you'll compress it all the way in and you're creating a lot more voltage. But then when you're expanded and you're expanding from expansion, it's like you already expanded the voltmeter to a certain level of voltage. And then now you're just maintaining that same voltage all the time and you're in that space. And this is what we're trying to fill up when they say filling up the sea of chi. So that whole abdominal core area is known as the sea of chi. And at the bottom where the perineum is the bottom ocean that we're observing. So the whole practice, when we're applying it to life and the function of our health, is to promote more voltage, more electricity, is to allow for thermal regulation, because that will be a part of digestion. So when we're digesting the food that we've eaten, when the place is compressed and tight, it takes a longer period of time. When the space is open, then it allows for the fetal matter to move through far more effortlessly. So this is on a health level, it's fundamental. Like doing that practice, you end up increasing your going toilet. I mean, if you're going 3-4 times a day already, then you're all right. If you're going once every 3 or 4 days, we need to address that one day. And not to say that this particular breathing technique may be the best option to utilize, but definitely massaging that space there is essential. And when you're practicing a technique like sinking chi, that's required as well. Excuse me. It's required because as you try to expand your space beneath your belly button, and you're trying to, it's like you're stretching the tissue. So all that space can become quite sensitive in that inguinal area there. You may feel irritation, so you have to massage that, apply a technique, which is like you're wringing out the tissue. You know, it's like you're making an S. Like you got the muscle on one side, the muscle on the other side of the muscle, but you're not on the same level. You're just one finger above or below, and you're squeezing together. So you'd be squeezing, let's say like this, if you can see me, in such a fashion in these areas, and then using some oil and just gently going along that space. And the same for the whole of your abdominal area. Once you start practicing this technique, it's important to massage the abdominal space, especially the rectus abdominis. More challenging to get to transverse abdominis, through being that it's underneath, but still through a deeper pressure, you can just slide over that. But that's really important. And it's because most of us have been practicing a breathing technique where we contract and expand. So therefore we're tightening the tissue always. It's always tightening, it's never relaxed, open. It's not at a constant tone expanded. It's losing its integrity and then gaining its integrity, losing its integrity, gaining its integrity, when it should be maintaining its integrity. And this is something that we should be maintaining through life. So sinking chi is not just a technique. For a Tai Chi master, let's say 70, 80, 90, maybe we've been practicing for 30, 40 years, sinking chi, or this breath, or this expansion should be constant, continuous. By the time you get to practicing that length of time, it's like constant state. That's why the elders there can do those fantastic things, because they're constantly, and if they're not constantly, they know how to activate that space to protect spine, to protect their lower back, their pelvic area, to protect their groin, diaphragm, the upper, protect the whole body. They know how to do that. This is why, and it's through the science of sinking the chi, helps a lot, as well as the expansion of the spine, which is really important because it allows for the alignment of the vertebrae as well. All right, so I think we are a few moments going to finish. So with our sinking the chi, we have everything really coming into play. We have our holding the one, which is the perineum. We have the idea of guarding the one, which is being in the center of our space beneath our belly button. And then we have the idea of maintaining an expansion in the belly area, allowing the space to fill up with vitality or electricity. When it overflows, which is the next stage of the alchemy process, but this is just stage one. The next stage of the alchemy process is that this chi overflows, overfills the cup, flows out over the saucer. Therefore, it goes up the spine into the lungs, it goes up into the brain, down into the legs. It starts to fill up to the fingertips. This is how the chi spread. But first, the chi has to have a place to be held in. And if the chi don't have a place to hold in, if we constantly compress, this is why the old ones would say that the vitality comes every day. Every moment is coming in to us. Then it goes. The elixir of life passes through us and we don't know how to hold on to it. Every moment we're breathing this vitality, this essence in, and every moment we're releasing. This is how the old one spoke about this stuff here. So the idea is to make a storehouse, to hold onto it, to create something where when this vital essence comes in, we've got a place to capture it. Once we capture it, then we can nurture it. Once we nurture it, then we can designate certain roles for it to do. We can distribute the chi or the energy or the voltage, the electromagnetic energy. We can distribute that with our intention. We find that through intention, the electromagnetic fields start to create. With our intention, we can direct that to anywhere. But before we can do that, and it is a process, we have to practice a science called sinking the chi.
Yeah, but really, really good. Even the bacteria and the wiring and the images of the sliding.
Telling you.
It is really interesting because even when it was showing the sliding, I was thinking about just action potential and the action potential of the nerve.
Okay.
You know, when the electricity is firing through nerves, you know.
How it's bouncing along.
Yeah. But even though bouncing along, it's really traveling like that.
Yeah. We see it in a straight line, but it's jumping from
it
each
is
side.
jumping. And that was interesting to see it because, you know, as above, so below. So just seeing the visuals of that was, really, really interesting.
Imagine them bacteria there, Christos, come together, and they make first they make a line, then they make a circle at the end, and then they send it out, and then the bacteria attaches like a lasso around a food particle. Well,
Yeah.
it's just, wow, I know what you mean. There's a part of me that is, how the nature creates something like that. That's deep. Everything is proactive.
Yeah.
Every layer of us is active, doing something.
And I was listening to Phil Valentine the other day, and he was saying something like science is just a bunch of theories that
Yeah.
the science don't really understand. And what I'm starting to see, well, since 2020 is that the things that are being revealed is only to the ones that practice.
Yeah. I know what you mean. There's no way of knowing.
Yeah.
So it's true, as Sankova asks there about does the lower back also expand when sinking the chi? Because I missed that little part there, because I had that diagram in that section where the enteric system was in the top corner, but I didn't highlight it or mention it. But there is an expansion because of that movement that's taking place. As you're breathing in and out, your lumbar spine is extending and flexing, opening and closing. That is the direction that the lumbar spine moves, isn't it, Christos? It's only doing flexion and extension. It's not
And then you got that what they call the nutation of the sacrum.
Yes, that's right. It's anterior and posterior tilt, which is taking place simultaneously as well. So it's like all these things come like a breath. When these things happen, it's just like everything's just going, everything's on its own little dancing. That's breath. We connect with the breath here as we lie down for a moment and breathe, and you will feel that space expand. You will feel energy or heat or something warm up the space. Space just release and let go. Mr. said, it's practice over time that makes us really appreciate this.
There was a question earlier on. What was it saying? Where was it?
Oh yes, and it is strengthening the muscles, the expansion, because you're maintaining this an expanded state. So your transverse abdominis, because it's maintaining this expanded state, and you're breathing in that, it's like you're tonifying the tissue to expand and to maintain that integrity. So this is how you're strengthening it. You're strengthening the muscle by maintaining the integrity of the expansion, which is creating more voltage.
Yeah, there's a really good book on even breathing. I think it's called The Science of Breathing or something like that. Really, really good book. And it was talking about the indigenous people as well. And one of the guys in the 1800s went around to the indigenous cultures. And he was studying actually that they had good teeth. By the way they were breathing. Their facial structure was less flat and more kind of angled, like as you would see of what they would call the Negroid features, again based on the breathing. And I forgot the name of this book, and it does make me want to do a presentation focusing on the diaphragm.
We'll probably look at that one there later on in the year. That's a closer look into that. But this whole core space, I hope everyone have a moment to appreciate. So we're going to be leaving everyone in a few moments. So if there are any questions or any other, and you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
I think someone was asking about the glutes as well, in terms of, is it important to have strong glutes or big glutes? Big glutes are one thing, strong glutes are another thing.
It's true. You need them though, you need them.
Yeah. You need strong glutes. So if they're big and strong, even better. Yeah. If they're just big for no reason, then, McDonald's you might have to leave alone for a little while. But definitely strong. Yeah.
Because you know that strength is like observing someone doing capoeira, doing gymnastics and that same kind of movement, but doing it in a concentrated space.
Mhm.
The same headstand, going down on one side, shifting the body to the left or to the right, spinning on the hands or these kind of things. Yeah, man, this is like the true expression of the core in action.
Mhm.
Once we have that ability there, stage is heretic, isn't it? What,
Yeah,
everybody?
Can I ask one more question before
Yes, my dear.
you go? Thank God again.
Yeah, man, go for it.
Sorry. Okay, we have a young man that's a brother who's coming to Tai Chi classes who has limited mobility and very weak limbs. Yeah. So what it would be the best way to help him to strengthen his core? Would it be the breathing or what? What physical? He's very, he cannot extend his arms fully. His hands are very weak. His legs are weak. He's also got sickle cell. He uses a mobility scooter. So his movements are very limited. From what you said tonight, like his core definitely, needs strengthening. I'm wondering what are the best ways from both of you to help him?
You can answer that, Christos, because I know Christos has direct experience of this one.
Thank you. Thank
you. Yeah, so we've one is just bearing in mind with the sickle cell, just what he can do or what he can't do. Anything that anyone does has to be starting off within what they're able to do. That's always a good place to start. There's different ranges of limitation in terms of limbs, but when you're working within the range of what you can do, if you can only move your, let's say, your arm up a little bit, up to there, then you work within that range until you can, the practice, the endurance of working through the range, you can quantify it with things like repetitions, counting how many times, or if he's doing any movements where he's holding it for a little while, quantifying, getting as much as a baseline and working within that baseline, even objectively writing it in a way where he'll be able to look back and kind of progress from there. Even sometimes even just taking pictures. That's why if you're training or exercising, sometimes it's always good to take a video of how you're doing something. And then you'll be able to, take the picture and then go back to the picture and see how you're doing. But again, breathing, just by, what Sahu was talking about with the breathing, you find that actually when you're breathing, how much easier things become. How the range and the movement, how the stiffness, the tone will loosen up just by the way of breath alone. So I would advise him, yes, especially with the sickle cell and, sickle cell and anemia and stuff like that. He's going to feel tense or tight in some areas, but by way of breathing, the most simplest thing that we can do, if it's done over a consistent period of time, not aggressive breathing to the point where he's feeling lightheaded or dizzy, but gentle breathing to the point where even now that he's able to control the pain much better by way of breath, all those things that Sahu was talking about is very crucial, and he'll be able to build up from there.
Yeah, that would be essential.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
Adding the breathing techniques to all these activities that he does, because that will definitely increase as well. Because it's a blood thing as well, isn't it,
Christos? Yeah. A lot of the time it's a lack of oxygen because again, the environment, the blood starts to thickle.
That's right.
As a whole, and it becomes stuck in the joints, and the blood become what they say sickle-like because it's the crescent shape, and they find out that the lack of oxygen increases the sickling of these red blood cells.
And we know from breathing, deep breathing practices, that there is an increase in blood production. There's an increase in oxygen through the body, pumped from the heart. Blood pressure reduces as well.
Yeah. And the interesting thing as well, and even while reading this book, it brought back my attention. It wasn't, they were saying actually the bigger problem, and it's interesting that you talked about the expansion of the belly, but it highlighted that the bigger problem was not necessarily breathing in, but being able to get rid of the carbon dioxide. So a lot of people are not just having the problem breathing in, but breathing out. And it's because everything is so close. So for example, in respiratory rehabilitation, they will teach you to purse your lips. So as you're breathing in and then you're breathing out, pursing the lips, but maintaining that pressure, that same pressure you're talking about, keeping the belly expanded, is the same pressure they're talking about in a different way, to purse the lips, to help keep the airways splintered open to allow the clearance.
When you're going through that process, it feels like you're gonna blow up. It feels like everything, the way when you're trying to expand and maintain it, and you're letting the air out slowly as you described it, and it's like you're like you're like that. It is like bam. Everything just feel like this thoracic outlet. All of a sudden, peer pressure going on the arteries and these things there. Oh man. So it is important to put the focus into the belly.
Yeah.
Put that pressure down to the lower belly area, or that pressure will expand in the chest and in the throat area. Glad you mentioned that as well. There's so many things to be aware of when it comes to going through the process. And once you've gone through it, you do find that there is you would think the stage of just expansion is enough, but then there are stages after this. We just talked about stage one, the foundation, just this idea. So give it a try, everybody. Try apply, add that to your everyday life as a hack through this reality, allowing space to always be maintained through your whole being. All right.
Yeah, that's good. And any other questions?
Yeah, I think everybody.
All right. Yeah. Well, looks like we will catch everyone again. So yeah, in 2 weeks we'll be going through some of the core strengthening exercises. So yeah, make sure you're wearing something loose and something ready, and be prepared.
All right.
All right. I think it's a goodbye then. All right. Take care.
We see everyone in 2 weeks. Have a good evening, everyone.